So Simon Grayson sacked as Blackpool manager, and nothing really surprises anymore when it comes to dismissals and how soon they come about. I think it was going to be a crucial few games coming up for Blackpool, and there's no doubt that the 3-2 defeat at home to Gillingham was a setback after, they ended their miserable run with a victory against Southend at the weekend. It's kind of one step forward, one step back in that sense, but it always seemed like it was going to be a case of the next few games being crucial. The transfer window was a big thing for Blackpool because I think what the run that they got themselves into and the rut they got themselves into, they were in the top 6 for much of the first half of the season, and it felt a little bit like Grayson was flagging his players a little bit too much. He was pretty much using the same 13 players week in, week out, every single game, Saturday, Tuesday, hardly rotating at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if no team in the division in League One has made fewer changes game to game than Blackpool this season. And it just felt like they were running on empty, and he was very uncompromising in what he was asking of his players. They're not necessarily the most fluid team in the division, and they're not necessarily, they don't just walk onto the pitch and outplay teams. They have to graft for every point that they get, and that's the kind of teams that Grayson builds. Very masculine in their approach, all about second balls and the physicality and that kind of things, can be quite direct at times. But it takes its toll physically, and you felt like they got to January and, this was a team running on empty and they needed reinforcements. They got all of those reinforcements. There was an injection of a bit more youth and a bit more quality, and Grayson had actually mentioned that himself, that he was looking for players with individual quality that could change a game by themselves, and that, some of the younger players he'd brought in would add something, would add a new dimension. But obviously they've got to come out of this run that they've been on, and that confidence is obviously low, and it had to change. And the win over Southend was a start. Last night, the Gillingham game was a setback they really could have done without. It was a stupid game in the sense that they could have been out of sight. They find themselves 2-0 down, they get back to 2-2, and then they're beaten in stoppage time. And it was one of those games that, alarming in itself, but I still felt like this had 4 or 5 games to run before. I was surprised when the local reporter from BBC Radio Lancashire was asking Grayson after the game, are you starting to feel any pressure? I thought it was a bit too soon. It can be so congested, League One, in that, there's 6 or 7 teams at the bottom of the table that aren't going to feature anywhere and are just happy to avoid the drop. And Blackpool are pretty much, at the bottom of the pile of teams that can still make the playoffs. Now, given they've been on this bad run, but Grayson's track record of getting teams into the playoffs at this level, but also winning the playoffs at this level, I'd have thought they'd have stuck this out a little bit longer. The question now is whether they've got someone else lined up to take his place, and that's why they've made the change, because somebody's available who they want. But otherwise, it seems a bit hasty to me. It feels like they could have gone 4 or 5 games, because the playoffs are not completely out of reach yet. I don't think a new manager's going to come in, bedding a new philosophy, get into, or, putting some new ideas across, and that honeymoon period carry over into the playoffs. It's too long for an extended honeymoon period now. But if Grayson was to turn this around and get them into the playoffs, then you look at his track record in the playoffs and you'd have to think there's no better manager to be in charge, and they'd have to be going in there with momentum now. So it seems like a bit of a strange decision to me, because I don't really see what they stand to gain from it in the short term. Even if they did want to change manager, they've got the summer for that. There's no danger of them being dragged into trouble, I wouldn't have thought. But Grayson is a manager that, if he was to turn it around now with the more resources, with more players to choose from, with the ability to rotate a bit more, if he was to turn it round, then you're kind of guaranteed that when you hit the final straight in April and May, that you're going to be on a good run of form if you get anywhere near those playoffs anyway. And, he has a playoff record. His management style is very suited to the playoffs. So it's just a bit of a confusing decision for me. I don't know why they feel like they had to make it right now. I think they could have at least given it another 4 or 5 games. And if the results didn't turn, then write the season off and build for next year. And you've still got 2 months to bring a new manager in, let him survey the scene, see what he's working with and plan for next year. Just the timing for me surprises me. I was surprised when the question came for Grayson last night, is he feeling the pressure? Is he under pressure? And now I'm even more surprised that they've actually pulled the trigger.